Assalamu alaikum. Assalamu alaikum, everybody, and hello. Welcome to World Hijab Day Conference 2026. If you've been with us since this morning, you've seen the powerhouse women that have been with us. We have two more powerhouses as we end this day on a very high note, inshallah. I'm Kiran Malik. I am on the World Hijab Day Organization board, honored and privileged to be there, and I'm a journalist as well. I've been a journalist for about 30 years now, and asking questions and telling stories is my passion. And today we have two amazing ladies. Just look at them, they are amazing, who are here to tell their stories and help us understand why are they doing what they're doing with power, with hijab, and without any apologies. Sultana and Medina, welcome. Assalamu alaikum.
Welcome, salam. Thank you so much for the kind invitation. It's a pleasure to be here.
Alaikum salam. Thanks for having me.
You are very welcome. So I'm going to start with bios because as a journalist, I like doing things in order. So we'll do your bios first, and then we'll start questions, and then we'll see where this conversation leads us. Thank you to everyone joining us live. We appreciate you taking out the time. Please drop us a line where you're tuning in from, and why are you here for World Hijab Day? And if I made you come here, then just don't say Kiran made me come here, okay? Because, I probably did. And I have a lot of friends, and family. So don't say that Kiran made me, okay? So Sultana Tafadar. Casey is a leading King's Counsel with a distinguished practice in complex criminal law, human rights, and strategic litigation. Known for her precision in cross-examination and courtroom advocacy, she is regularly consulted in high-stakes and sensitive matters. She's also the first hijab-wearing, we love that, hijab-wearing criminal barrister appointed Casey in the UK, a position that informs her wider work on leadership, inclusion, and justice. And you get extra points for wearing pink, lady. How about that?
Thank you. I like the extra points. Thank you.
You like extra point. I think we all do, don't we? It's just one of those things. Representative Medina. I actually love your name. It is a beautiful name. I think more people should have that name for sure. And I'm going to pull out my cheat sheet right here and get your bio going. If you give me just 1 second. So Medina Wilson Anton, the first Muslim elected to Delaware State House at 26. Lady? 26. That's amazing. MashaAllah. Brings her unique perspective as a Black woman with vitiligo and both politics and comedy. So you've got jokes. I can't wait to.
We'll see if they land today.
We'll see if this lets us have jokes. I think we should have jokes. It's important to have jokes, for sure. A rising star since 2020, she's entertained audiences nationwide with stand-up while championing progressive leadership at home. So once again, welcome, ladies. We are so glad you took the time out to be with us for this very important conference, for these very important topics. And the idea always, of course, is to inform people and tell them what's happening, which is, why are we as hijabis doing what we're doing? So Sultana, I'll come to you first. If you want to tell us a little bit about your journey as a hijabi lawyer and what you've done and how you have navigated obstacles and opportunities.
Okay. Well, thank you so much. So I'm a barrister. I've been a barrister since 2005. So despite my youthful looks, I have been in the job for quite a while. So it's a very white male-dominated profession here in the UK. Barristers are specialists who tend to go to court, and so we do the courtroom advocacy, we do the trials, and so forth. And in 2022, so a few years ago, I was appointed King's Counsel. King's Counsel is, I guess, the highest sort of rank you can achieve as a barrister or as a lawyer in the UK. And it's, so alhamdulillah, I was very lucky to have been appointed. And it's a very rigorous process. Just to give an idea about statistics, I mean, the bar, the English bar has been around for hundreds of years. Over those hundreds of years, approximately sort of in the region of 500 women have been appointed King's Counsel. Out of that, at the time I was appointed, only about 34 Black and brown women were ever appointed King's Counsel. And so I was the first one in hijab at the criminal bar. There is also somebody at the commercial bar as well. So it's tough, it's competitive, it's grueling, it's difficult because the more sort of there are layers and layers of discrimination that sometimes we have to tackle. So it comes from, race, gender, religion, but also being visibly Muslim is an added aspect of an area that we have to navigate. So the obvious difficulties are that often people have a perception of you. People don't see often a woman in a hijab and think about ability immediately. They always think about lack of ability. And so it always becomes this situation where you actually have to show that you are more than capable. And the irony of it is that actually sometimes, more often than not, you are competing with mediocre counterparts. But you have to almost excel to be placed on that same plane or the same level. And people have said, well, when I took silk, there were some people who said, well, you were appointed because of these protected characteristics that you have. Well, I mean, I sit on the appointments panel now, and I can assure you that we don't know what people's protected characteristics are when they are appointed. There's an assessment process, a reference process that takes place. And so when people, when it's said, it's actually people who may have actually been appointed because of their race and their color, and it's usually because they're white, and it's because they're male. Because, and so the irony is that we're often put in this position of being told that we're the tick box, the equalities tick box, but actually we're not. It's because we've had to push against all those barriers and find ourselves in a position where we can actually excel, and not because of our color, our religion, or our race. So that's the journey. It has been an ongoing journey. I'd like to say it gets easier, but I'll be honest, it doesn't get easier, because when you reach the heights of any profession, you actually enter into a zone where there is more discrimination because there are less of us there. And so you enter a sphere, I call it the dinosaur sort of sphere, where now you are really battling it with people with very set views, old-fashioned, and also the kind of genre of people that have historically, not necessarily now, but historically have sort of dominated those ranks. And so it's not always easy going into leadership positions because you still do have the journey almost begins again. But that's not to say you don't make that journey and you don't enter those ranks, because those barriers have to be broken down for the next generation of people that are coming.
Absolutely. And we stand on the shoulder of giants. We realize that as Muslim leaders and as public speakers, we get that. So those structural barriers, while they're still there, and they will be there, like you just said, mostly white men, and not to, well, yeah, just it's a fact. Mostly white men, right? They get what they get in terms of how the world works. It is just that we are knocking down those structural barriers, and we are doing what we need to do vocally and fearlessly, right? I had said that earlier in a Friday session. The time for apologies is over. Do not expect one. It's not going to come from any hijabi woman. We're not going to apologize for our identities. And speaking of identities, Medina, I'll come to you. You entered politics at just 26. That is, my God, that is so young and so admirable. As the first Muslim elected to Delaware's State House, how did you navigate being visibly different while building credibility and trust in a political system rooted in tradition?
So I guess my answer is going to vary a bit from the barristers. And I've actually had a very positive experience. And I feel blessed to be able to say that. When I first started running for office, I was 25. I was knocking on doors of people in my community. And I think a lot of people in my community were feeling frustrated, tired of the same old thing, tired of the same problems and lack of solutions. And I remember a particular woman, I knocked on her door, and she was excited that I was not just young, but that I was not white, that I was Muslim. And she was saying it, and she was saying it in a way that probably, would be like canceled. It's not super woke, right? She was saying it very clear, very direct. And she was just like, I'm glad you're not white. I'm glad you're not old.
I was about to say, don't repeat everything here.
Yeah, I was like, this is really not PC, but I get what you mean, and I appreciate you, and I found that to be the case at a lot of people's doorsteps. When I would talk to them, they would say, it's time for us to have someone with a different perspective. And so I would say my experience overall has been very positive in that sense. as a comedian, I also have been, I think, it's been a blessing to stand out, right? In an industry that's a lot of white men, a lot of the time when someone is booking a show and they're looking for talent, they need someone to round out the lineup, right? And I was on a show just a couple of days ago where I was the only woman and I was the only person of color, definitely the only Muslim. And so I do see it as an asset in spaces where people are looking for something different. But with that does come pressure of, feeling like, okay, I'm the only person that this community has ever seen that looks different or has a different perspective or comes from a different background, and I don't want to mess it up. And so I do feel
no pressure whatsoever.
Right, sure. No pressure. Like even as a staff person before I was elected, I remember feeling that pressure of being the only Muslim really in the space and wanting to make sure that I was setting a good example. And that's difficult. And I know there are a lot of Muslim women who cover and then eventually stop covering because they feel like, well, I don't want to be that, the image of what a hijabi is for this person or everyone I interact with forever. It feels like so much. And so I really do, I think, identify with that experience. And I've talked to friends of mine who've struggled with that over the years. But overall, I would say my experience has been very positive. I do get hate mail. I get, the typical Islamophobia, racism, honestly, a lot of anti-Black racism. Crazy. I know it's 2026. But a lot of the time, that's not so much from just my identity, but that's from the fact that I'm a very outspoken kind of a firebrand in the local political scene. And so it comes with the territory.
Hey, at World Hijab Day, we light firebrands. So none of us are here are sparks or candles to begin with. It's lava, baby, lava. So you think twice before whatever, right? So tell me this to go off on a tangent as well. How do you navigate politics and comedy? They're both sometimes at the opposite ends of the spectrum. One is like, oh, wait a minute. So how are you doing this?
Are they though? Actually?
Yeah, are they? Yeah, I do a joke about that. The barrister's spot on, right? I do a joke about this. People say, well, you do politics and comedy. They're so different. Are they really that different nowadays? At least not in my country here in the US. There's a lot of clowns in politics now, unfortunately. But what I try to do is when I do my comedy, I don't focus on vulnerable groups. I don't do what we consider punching down, right? Like I think there are a lot of comedians who make jokes about people that are vulnerable, and I just don't find that funny. That's not my style. I like to make jokes about myself. I like to focus on observations that I'm making about the world, and so my comedy is pretty PC, unlike that conversation I had at the door with a community member. And then when it comes to politics, I'm a very serious politician, and so when I first started doing comedy a couple of years ago, and my colleagues found out, they were very confused by that. And I remember the faces that they would make when I would say, yeah, I have a show this Saturday. They'd say, like,
what?
People find you funny? Because
oh my God.
I'm very serious. I'm very serious at work. Like I'm very focused on what's important to my community. And so my persona at work is very different than the character that you see on stage when I'm performing comedy. And I think that's important. It's at least important to me to make sure that, I might have silly moments with colleagues and try to use jokes to break tension at times, but overall, the state representative is focused on the job and is not there to make people laugh or make friends. I will say, though, in both roles, I feel very blessed to have two positions where I'm able to bring laughter to people and bring happiness to people. And whether it's through helping someone get a resource that they need through my state office, or helping someone forget an issue that they're dealing with just for a few moments while I'm on stage. I really appreciate being able to do both of those things.
And that's where the question stemmed from, right? That one role is serious and it demands what it demands from you 9 to 5. And then maybe the 5 to 9 is that persona of a comedian. And it's walking that line. So yes, in that case, definitely very different. But we're not going to talk about the clowns in politics right now because we're not going to go there. Okay. We're not okay. We're just going to stay here and we're going to stay in our lane because Nazma is going to kill me then because I don't want to be killed by Nazma. I have children. So no. And I have parents, so no.
Like I have to be around for them. I love how dramatic that got.
I know, right? I've had people who love me, and I like, listen. So Sultana, to come back to you, your work in complex criminal and human rights cases often involves high stakes advocacy and being a champion. How does your identity as a hijabi woman inform your leadership role, your style, your courtroom presence, and your approach to justice?
Well, I mean, actually, my specialist area is terrorism and national security work. So those are the types of cases I work on. So it's interesting, sort of my presence in court, because and also when it comes to case preparation, I have a different approach to it than my counterparts, in the sense that I have an advantage in terms of language, in terms of having an insight into the ideology, the theology, into geopolitics, and all of those things come into play. So actually, there's a real benefit, I guess, in having somebody who is versed in those types of areas when defending in these types of cases. And what usually starts off is the very sort of intense trials, as you can imagine. In any country, a terrorism trial or a national security trial is very, very intense, and especially if you're defending in one of those. So you can imagine, sometimes, the court settings is all quite dramatic. You have a client who's in the dock who will be viewed as just pure evil. Often, there's a perception. And it always, whenever there's a prosecution, in any prosecution case, it starts really high. And what's really interesting is when you see the trial process unfold. And what I do is chip away at it, and I introduce and I explain to the jury the different aspects of the case. Often when prosecuting, things are put in very binary terms. Things are put in very sort of black and white and stark terms. Often they haven't understood the issues and they're presenting this misunderstanding. And so what I'm able to do is break down those misconceptions by cross-examining prosecution witnesses, and also by calling defense witnesses. Now, what's the perception of me then in these types of trials? And it's really interesting because, often people said, oh, well, you shouldn't do these trials because you will be seen, as, you're a Muslim and then you're defending in these types of trials. There's an assumption, do you agree or not? As defense lawyers, our role is to represent whoever it is. It's not for us to judge, just like a surgeon would carry out an operation. You don't decide anything about that person other than what's the ailment and what's the diagnosis and how is it dealt with. And so the whole point of defense lawyers is to uphold the rule of law, is to uphold those principles of democracy that we all hold so valuable. And so that's my role. It's to ensure that the defendant has the right to a fair trial, because if that defendant doesn't have the right to a fair trial, it really impacts the entirety of society. Now, we know for a fact that Muslims, do get arrested, overwhelmingly under counterterrorism measures, sometimes rightly, sometimes wrongly. And so it's making sure that everybody who is arrested does have adequate representation. And I've had lots of not guilty verdicts coming from the jury. How do juries perceive me? Again, I can't, of course, I don't go into the jury deliberation rooms, but what tends to happen is when you have people from the same community of the accused, often because they see that defendant as somebody who doesn't even have human-like qualities, they will just see them as this evil entity sitting there. When you appear in front of them wearing a hijab, speaking, presenting, and actually knowing what you're talking about, it actually cloaks the lay client with the veneer of respectability. They then start attaching actually positive qualities that they may see in you as a representative to that lay client. So essentially it means that there's a process whereby they no longer see that defendant as just being this pure evil entity, this sort of almost animalistic character. So there is a role to play of Muslims representing Muslims, of Black lawyers representing Black defendants. It really does bridge that gap. But sometimes when you have a lawyer who comes from a white male middle class background, it really creates, and who doesn't understand all these issues that are played, who misunderstand words, who don't understand even the basics, it does create a bigger gap and a bigger disparity of understanding, which doesn't actually help the lay client or anybody at the end of the day. So yeah, so I could say that, you know, sometimes what we perceive or others may perceive as a weakness, i.e. wearing the hijab, and a lot of people do perceive it. And I know lots of people who come to me and say, look, I've been told not to wear the hijab if I'm working, if I want to become a barrister, if I want to do this. And I say that's ridiculous, because they haven't done the journey, I have. And what people say is your Achilles heel actually is your strength. You know, other people have been appointed King's Counsel or Queen's Counsel, but the reason I ended up with a lot of media coverage, something in the region of sort of the press coverage, which just went global, something in the region of 350 million in terms of viewers and readers.
Wow.
And it was just everywhere. I mean, you know, my claim to fame, I was even in Harper's Bazaar Arabia. They did a feature on me.
Cool.
But it was, you know, that was supposedly my Achilles heel. And yes, I did have to deal with a lot because I wore the hijab, but actually that was also my strength. You know, I would walk into court wearing a white hijab where everybody else were wearing wigs. So immediately I'd stand out, but rather than sort of recoil from it, you just embrace it. And actually, you know, why not enjoy the attention that the hijab is giving? And literally, you know, 20 years, I mean, now it's 20 years, but I took silk about 3-4 years ago. So after, you know, a decade and a half of working and facing whatever obstacles I did, it was the hijab that actually shot, you know, it was the achieve, you know, that is why I was in the press, because of the hijab. And in some ways, you know, people say, oh, well, you know, it's your abilities and so forth. Of course it is, but I'm glad the hijab got the news, got the headline. I'm glad people said she who wears a hijab got it. That doesn't take away from my abilities, but I'm glad there's an acknowledgement that actually women in hijab can break barriers and can make it. And so for me, I'm happy to be the hijabi. I care less about my own name. I am glad to be a hijabi representative.
Absolutely, and that's wonderful. And to your point, don't you get a kick out of it when your own Muslim men, women around you, close to you, very gently, and again, I understand it comes from a place of love sometimes, or care. I get that too. It's like, but you know, maybe the hijab is a hindrance. Maybe you should consider taking it off. I'm like, did you just say that to me?
I mean,
Leave go away from me. Like, no, do you understand what you just said as a Muslim person, right? So there's that aspect as well. And I love how you said that you being that representative with the hijab on are also humanizing those who may not have been, and they would not get that opportunity. So I think that is amazing. When we wear the hijab, we enter a room, we are representing so much. And it's time everybody got that, because it is so important, right? And sometimes, you know, explaining it to our own people as well and going, you know what? Guess what? I don't want to be around people who do not understand why I wear this, which is why it has been my thing and my goal to explain and to answer questions, to join these platforms where I'm out there, easily available to speak to ask those questions off as a leader, as a public speaker, to demystify the hijab. Excuse me, there are real problems in the world. Let's get to them. My hijab is not your problem, whether you're Muslim or not. So next time you want to say that to a Muslim woman, please think, and don't say it, because it is not a hindrance, right? And nothing will make us take it off, because again, progress for us, right? So kudos to you, Sultana, for being that. Medina, to come back to you. I'm looking at the clock as well. We are so destined to go over time, and that's okay, because it's a fun conversation and we're fun ladies. We talked about comedy and politics, and again, I'll keep my my original premise of them being opposite ends of the spectrum in what they ask of a person, right? On that curiosity and that comedic self. But tell me, how does comedy help you engage audiences when you uniquely blend both politics and comedy, right? And how has humor helped you challenge stereotypes, connect with constituents, and then also help them understand the hijab? I don't like to use the word humanize hijab, because it is humanized. It is who we are. It's like people saying normalize the hijab. What's the opposite of normal? and it's not that. So we're part of the mainstream. We're here. We're talking to you. So tell me, how do you approach that, please?
So I would say I have definitely been more recently, now that I'm doing comedy professionally, I have been using comedy and comedic timing to diffuse tension in difficult situations at work. I'm not always successful in that. It's a very serious job and it gets very tense at times. But I do think that it's important when we talk about, democracy, right? And having different folks, different actors, different interest groups that have different values, and different things that animate them. It's still important for us to have some ability to interact civilly. And I think humor is a really important way to do that. It's a way for us to connect. I would say I've used humor over the years to develop relationships with members of the General Assembly that people would be surprised I have a relationship with, right? Because I'm able to joke with them, because I'm able to relate to them in some way. And, I'm going to push back a little bit on your premise again, because I think both the work of a politician and the work of a comedian require you to be able to communicate. And to communicate with people that are often either different from you or have different viewpoints than you. And so I feel I've been able to use my comedic skill in politics as I'm, at a community meeting, and people are stressed about some kind of issue, to make a joke, whether the joke is at my own expense or at some evil actor that's causing us a problem, to get everyone to relax a little bit, to feel that they do connect with me and they have something in common with me, and then offer a solution. And I feel like there's a lot of synergy between both of the professions. When I first started doing comedy, I remember I wasn't very funny, but people still felt like I did a good job. And I remember I would get off stage and I would be like, they didn't laugh at this, they didn't laugh at that. People would say, yeah, but your stage presence is really good. And you don't seem nervous. I say, oh, I'm so nervous. You didn't seem nervous at all. And then when I would say I was a politician, they're like, aha, that's what it is, because you've already gotten comfortable with public speaking. Yeah. So you're able to enunciate, you're able to share, concepts. People were listening. They're like, we're listening. We didn't laugh out loud, but we were captivated. And so it's through those conversations that I realized there was definitely a lot of similarities in the skill sets that are required for both. And then to your question about people, connecting with people, one of the things that I really find to be a hidden blessing of comedy is, because I'm a new comedian, I take gigs wherever, like if I can get there, I'm going. And so I've gone to different gigs that are in very rural parts of the neighboring states to me, Pennsylvania, Maryland, New Jersey. And so I've performed for audiences that are much different than the community that I represent. Very white, very rural, very conservative, and I'm still able to make them laugh. And that challenge of having to find something that you can relate to an audience that doesn't have the same background as you, doesn't have the same upbringing as you, I think has really pushed me to be more creative in my approach. And it's also given me the opportunity to connect with people that I otherwise wouldn't have interacted with, which I think has really informed my political opinions and my political philosophy even, right? Like when I'm interacting with other progressives and they're like, I can't believe people think X, Y, and Z. I'm like, well, I had an interesting conversation with a woman who thought that after a show. And because I was able to make her laugh about something that we have in common, she felt comfortable afterwards to ask me a question about my hijab, about my religion. I don't really do jokes about being Muslim. I just do jokes about being a human that lives in this country, that deals with parents and siblings and aging and medical ailments and things that people, regardless of their background, get. And once you've brought down that barrier, people feel more comfortable to engage. And I've really been enjoying that process.
I completely agree. I think laughter is the best way to break the ice between people. Sense of humor matters, right? It just matters a lot to me. You've noticed we've been talking for about 29 minutes now, not very serious, and that's absolutely fine. It is what it is, right? But thank you for that. I think it's important to remember that at the end of the day, it is, our similarities. And it's such a cliche, but, hey, because there's a need to say it, we'll say it again and again. It's our similarities that bring us together. We do like laughing at good jokes and having fun and having a good time as well, right? So there's that is that synergy that you just spoke about, right? And plus, I love stand-up comedy too, so I'm going to look you up, and you'll have another fan probably. So Sultana, back to you. Precision, credibility, and power are often defined narrowly in legal spaces. So, as a hijabi, how can institutions redefine leadership standards to genuinely is a key word here, isn't it? Include hijabi women and other marginalized voices. Like Medina had said, and you had said, it's not just a check mark, right? We're not your token people. We've all been asked to be on boards or to be speakers because there's a check mark that needed to be on it. I was like, oh, what's more to it? So we know how to navigate that. So, Sultana, what are your thoughts on that?
So in terms of the legal profession here, there is a drive to improve diversity within the profession. And there's been some sort of change towards the very junior end. So you're getting more diverse people from diverse backgrounds joining. I can't say it's a mass influx, but there are sort of systems and processes in place to try and ensure. And it's not because anybody is giving people from diverse backgrounds just open the door and saying come in. It's trying to give them an opportunity that they have historically been denied. And it's also looking back historically about the background, perhaps people coming from socioeconomic backgrounds that weren't as affluent as their white counterparts. So it's taking all of those factors into account and trying to give people an equal opportunity to get in. So when people do get in, it's not because they are, because of their race, religion, and gender. They get in genuinely because the qualities and the merit they have has historically been denied. And now there's more of an opportunity to recognize that. And so you're starting to get a little bit more of this access into this profession at the lower end. But what happens is towards the middle, people start dropping out. And actually women tend to drop out of most professions because it's very hard for women to progress. When you look at the issue of intersectionality, when you look at race and religion and these other protected characteristics, the pressure and the difficulty that people can find is magnified manyfold. And then getting to the top is very, very difficult because, again, most people have started dropping out at the middle stages. So it's really important for institutions to recognize that and ensure that everybody has an opportunity to progress. And by having an opportunity, for example, when we look at, women's rights, we look at things like, maternity leave, for example, because you have to recognize that, again, because of gender, there are differing things that need to be taken into account. So when a woman returns to practice after a period of time away, they have to help and provide more opportunities of building a business and, getting the right types of cases. So again, there is, what I'm describing is institutional racism or institutional sexism or institutional Islamophobia. And wherever you look, it is embedded, and these structural barriers do need to come down. It's not dependent on those of us who face it to break them down, but in reality, of course, that is what happens. But institutions need to take a deeper, better look at those and see how they can create opportunities for people who have merit to excel. Okay, so it's not the case that, and so as I said when I started off, sometimes, in the sort of leadership roles, you may find a Muslim woman wearing a hijab who's made it there, not because they're a diversity tick box, but because they have probably more merit than everybody else that's occupying that position. But they've had to break through all of those barriers. So they are, much better than the counterparts. But because, the counterparts, I often say, you're competing sometimes with mediocre white men. And so it's really important. There are so many aspects to look at, but looking at access, retention, and progression within a profession is really important for professions to look at. With our regulator, the legal regulator here, it's the Bar Standards Board, I chair their task force on religion and belief because it's important that the bar understand, that this profession understands the structural barriers that people face, including Muslim women that wear hijab. And I think of all the protective characteristics, religion is the most misunderstood. People think, well, you don't have to be Muslim. You can choose not to be Muslim. With race, you can't change your skin color and so forth. But with religion, okay, it's a belief, you can change your belief. but they don't understand how, that in itself is, that type of expression is wrong, and that actually, the somebody's religion and belief is so intrinsically linked to their identity that it can have a real devastating impact on that person if they're forced to change things about themselves. As Muslims, we all have anxiety. Can I pray on time? Will I be able to wear the hijab? Can I fast while I'm working? Are there difficulties? And it's really important that institutions learn how to make accommodations for those characteristics. And it's not difficult, just make sure you don't have a meeting when it's time for iftar. Make sure somebody gets a break when it's time to pray. And it's really asking for these things is really important. In the early days, I remember being very anxious to ask, can I have a break, please, during court time in the middle of cross-examination. And I asked, and I said, look, I need a break. Beforehand, I told the judge's clerk. And I remember in the afternoon, I was in the middle of cross-examination, and the judge kept looking over at me. And I thought, oh gosh, have I done something wrong? Am I some kind of trouble? I was very junior and very sort of a little bit nervous. And the judge he said, stop, Miss Taffeta. He sent the jury out. He sent the defendant downstairs. And he said, Miss Taffeta, I think it's time for you to pray. And
that is amazing.
And he said, how much do you need? I was so taken aback. Can I just say, in my defense, I had wudu and it was asr, so it's a short prayer. I said, just 5 minutes. I was so grateful. I just 5 minutes. He said, no, Miss Taffeta, you must take as much time as you need. I'll give you 30 minutes, and if you need more time, tell me. I can tell you, this was the longest asr prayer I've ever done in my life.
I've been asked to make it for 30 minutes instead of 5. Let me do that.
There I was fearing I can't pray on time, and here it is now I'm being forced to pray longer than I need to. So sometimes we just have to ask for these things that we're worried about, and actually we'll find people are accommodating, and if they're not, then we still, it's our right. Ask for it, take it, and actually sometimes we'll find the battle isn't hard as we think it is going to be.
And that's just it. I'm so glad you said that. To your point, ask the questions. And I completely understand that not every environment is conducive to it. I get that completely. I've been in work places where, I thought maybe I can't, and I did. And I simply said, I need 3 minutes, like you said, 5, right? So I said, it's a 3-minute thing. And I've run to my car to go make my salah. Because at the end of the day, I am not going to leave my namaz, and that's important. I've prayed behind vending machines and in a poetry recitation in a theater. Hey, you got to do what you got to do, right? But at the end of the day, asking that question is important. How are we approaching the topic? How are we saying, you know what? It's so easy to say representation matters, because it does. But at the end of the day, what are we doing to create that representation? Are we actually articulating our necessities, right? We pray 5 times a day. I often tell people who ask, but why do Muslims get so emotional about their religion? Well, guess what? It is part of us 5 times a day. And it's not just a weekly thing, and it's who we are, right? So that prayer keeps us very organized as well. So kudos to you for being able to articulate it. And again, I completely understand not everybody is able to, but at the end of the day, whatever we're doing for Allah, Allah will make it easy. Right? He's the one we're doing this for, whether it's the hijab, whether it's a salah. Let's approach it from that lens first, and then see how things get easy, because you know what, they will. That's his promise. And who are we to debate that, right? So last question, Medina, for you as a Black hijabi woman, your leadership disrupts multiple norms at once, and yay for that, disruptors. That's what we are, and that's okay. How do you remain authentic while facing public scrutiny? And what advice do you have for hijabi women stepping into leadership roles, especially young ladies as well who are watching right now?
That's a really big couple of questions there. So I would say, as far as remaining authentic, I think it's important that before you get into leadership, that you ground yourself in your community. And so one of the things that I found really important for myself was, as I was running for office, I had people that were supporting me. I had friends in politics. I had friends that were not in politics. And I promised myself that I was going to continue to stay in touch with them. Once you get into a new role, it's natural to develop friendships or working relationships with people that you interact with a lot. And I've seen people start to isolate themselves from the communities that got them into office, the people that supported them before and that shared their values. And so I think that's one thing that's very important, regardless of the kind of leadership that you're trying to get into, that you remain grounded in the community that you hope to represent and to serve. And sometimes that means being intentional, right? Like we are intentionally praying at set times throughout the day. I think sometimes it's important that you set a reminder for yourself that you're going to check in with that friend that keeps you grounded, that holds you accountable once a week or once a month, whatever is necessary. Because sometimes it goes from that casual, you're running into them and you're able to spend time with them, to now you're too busy to just casually do that. And so having those intentional check-ins, I think, is really important. Now, as far as being a Black woman and being a Muslim woman, I've been that my whole life. And so I just am myself. And that does mean that I'm often disrupting in both spaces, right? As a member of the Black Caucus, I have had a lot of tension around issues like we're starting with the prayer and the prayer is not inclusive, right? Or we're doing activities that are meant to bring us together that are not inclusive, again, within the Black community. But that's something that I've experienced going back to as young as being a teenager, and being on the college campus where the Black Student Union was, focused on gospel music and bringing pastors in and like things like that. And I remember having those conversations pretty early on. On the other side, then the Muslim community, a lot of the time we're focused on immigrants, we're focused on first generation Americans, we talk about Ramadan, we're talking about samosas, and we're talking about cultural foods. And we're often not being inclusive of one of the largest communities, if not the largest, within the US at least, which is the African American Muslim community. There's a lot of anti-Black racism within the Muslim community, which I've experienced, which I've seen others experience over the years. And my nature is just to call it out. And so that's what I do. And I want to circle back to the conversation we were just having before this last question, where Sister Sultana was talking about asking for time to pray. And I think it's really important that we underscore just how important that action was that she took. Because like you said, it's not always as easy as someone saying yes, but because she asked for it, even if they had said no, the next person who asks has an easier time. And I think that's one of the most important parts about representation, is when we start those conversations, down the road, they become much easier. And down the road, we see younger women who wear hijab, who are inspired by the steps that we've taken, pushing things even further. I remember being a college student and, like you said, praying in stairwells, praying in corners, looking around and trying to time the traffic and say, okay, I don't see anybody. No one has walked for 5 minutes. I think I'm safe to pray here and I won't have someone walk in front of me. And as I was getting towards the end of my time in undergrad, I remember us as the Muslim Student Association going to school leadership and saying, we need somewhere to pray. And we need somewhere where we can make wudu. And we need all these things. And it didn't happen. And then I've gone back years later, there's a prayer room. There's a wudu station in the student center. And I do think that the wudu station was just the university being like, all right, we got to figure something out. Because there's water everywhere every Friday. But it was through that sustained, request from students that over time it's benefiting others. And I've gotten requests from students in high school that are saying, we want prayer rooms in every high school in the state. And I'm like, I don't know if my imagination is even as bold as yours, but let's work on it,
Yeah.
And I think that's I think we often overlook the impact downstream that we're having when we are having these conversations. So I just wanted to underscore that because I got goosebumps when you said that, when the judge says to you, it's time, right? Like that's beautiful. And imagine the next hijabi, right? Doesn't have to ask. They might just say, do you need time to pray? Cause right. And then she's like, well, yes, thank you. And that's a sadaqah jariyah really that you're getting.
Yeah.
So yeah, kudos to you.
Thank you.
Absolutely, kudos to you. And now on that note, I am looking at the clock again, but anything else you ladies would like to add that you think we haven't talked about when it comes to the hijab? I'm especially interested in getting to our young ladies who are watching, who maybe are thinking about the hijab, or who think that maybe they shouldn't be doing it or should be doing it. Even little girls watching from all over the world and thinking, you know what, I see these amazing hijabi women who are doing so much and who are making a difference in the world. They're change makers. How is it that we can do this? So any thoughts on that?
I mean, I guess I would say, don't be afraid to stand out. Often people say to me, oh, I don't really want to stand out. And if I wear a hijab, well, why do you want to blend in? Why, the opposite is just becoming just sort of normal like everybody else. Why not enjoy it and celebrate it? And it is a part of, if it's a part of you, it's a part of you. There's nothing to shy away from. There's nothing to downplay. Just be as you are in your hijab. It doesn't mean your personality has to change. I see this sometimes and I hate it. And I say, don't become this personality. Don't become a stereotype of what people think you should be in a hijab. Be as you are. Because, I crack jokes, believe it or not, as well. And people are shocked. I mean, I'm sure you both get the same reaction. People are shocked, but a woman in a hijab can actually make a joke and they fall off themselves. They actually can't, get their head round that, we have the ability to joke and laugh. And actually that goes such a long way in terms of breaking the stereotype they have. And so don't be afraid to be you. Don't become that stereotype. I do see, again, young people who come into the profession or student life can be quite comfortable and cozy and you're in a bubble. When you come out in the real world, sometimes people don't know how to navigate themselves. Just be you, be very grounded and understand why you're wearing the hijab. Understand that, you're not, this kind of, a reject of society, that you are entitled, you have all the rights that every other person has. And ultimately the hijab is, you and your relationship with Allah, and we shouldn't allow anything to come between that. And so don't start becoming this, walking around in a shell and how can I blend in and I'm not going to speak up. Be all the things you are, with or without your hijab. Just don't shy away and don't crave to be, don't crave just to blend in. Just, embrace standing out. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that.
I love that, embrace standing out, because that's what we do, and again, unapologetically as well, right? That's one of those things. And I know some things come with age. As you grow older, you have that confidence that comes with it. I get that completely. But I think as hijabi leaders, it is our job to also show young ladies, girls, and help them understand that this is something that is to be so very much proud of, because it is what it is. Allah has chosen us for this, right? Shiri always says, and I love it, without saying a word, without saying anything, people know we're a Muslim, mashallah, because we wear the hijab as Muslim women, right? So I love the fact that we have that identity. Medina, to you?
Yeah, I mean, everything was spot on. I agree with everything. I'll share a little bit of a different perspective, which is the difficulty of standing out, right? So I spoke earlier about how beneficial it is. It can also be a lot of pressure. It can also be stressful. I can say, like yesterday, I went out to brunch with a friend. We're tucked in the corner. We're not anywhere near my district, and the waitress just so happened to recognize me, right? And so we're trying to eat breakfast, and she's wanting to ask questions about politics and do you have a card on you and all that. And, sometimes I'll try to go to the grocery store quickly and I'll have a sweatshirt and I'm, a sweatshirt around my head instead of my hijab, and someone recognizes me because of my vitiligo and they're like, aren't you the state rep? And I'm like, I'm just trying to get in and out. I've got stuff going on at home. And so it can be stressful. And I remember, I wish it's only in the most, tedious ways, unfortunately. But I remember for the first time I went on a study abroad to Morocco, and for the first time I felt like I blended in, right? And by blending in, I mean I could walk down the street and no one asked me a question. No one was staring at me like I stood out, like I was strange. Because there is that experience when you wear the hijab in a place where most people are not wearing it, where people look at you funny and stare. And I noticed after a few days, this feels really nice to just be me and to not stand out and to not feel like I have to represent billions of people with my behavior and things like that. And so I do feel like there is something to that. And my advice to someone who's struggling with that is to make sure that you have community, right? To find women that have a similar experience to you and to maybe find a mentor, like the amazing Sultana who's on with us, right? Someone that can give you advice on how to navigate those difficult situations. I know I talked to one of my good friends about it at times. I think it's really important as a Muslim woman, whether you cover or not, whether you're in politics or you're in the legal space or in healthcare, to find others that have a shared experience with you, to find community, to help kind of re-energize yourself when you're having those difficult times. But definitely, as was said earlier, embrace standing out in a time where people, I think, are starting to look even physically the same with surgeries and dental work and all these things. I think standing out and having something unique about you is really invaluable. And so I would say stick to it and just find those around you that can help support you through it.
Hey, to standing out and to have a community that supports you and a community that you support is always important. And that's something I think all of us, especially as Muslims, should embrace, because at the end of the day, we're nothing without community. And Muslims are not supposed to be in silos. We are a social religion, mashallah. We are out there taking care of each other and our families, and our siblings and our friends. And that's beautiful. Thank you so much, Jazakallah khair, for being here. I appreciate the fact that you both took time out for this very important conversation, Sultana and Medina. More power to you in what you're doing. Ladies and gentlemen, and everybody watching, if you take away one thing from today's conference, please take away this. The hijab is not an apology for Muslim women, anytime, anywhere. And you don't need to understand to respect. Respect comes with the territory, because that's what it's all about. You don't have to understand. And if you don't get it, you will never get it. That's absolutely fine. That respect that needs to come with being an individual, with being with someone, is non-negotiable. So thank you again to all of you joining us from all over the world, 150 countries. We appreciate you taking out the time. Happy World Hijab Day. We're here, we're strong, and we'll always be. Assalamu alaikum, and bye, everybody.